Random House Audio presents The Rose Man of Sing Sing, a true tale of life, murder, and redemption in the age of yellow journalism. By James McGrath Morris. Read for you by John H. Mayer. There is a concatenation of all events in the best of possible worlds. For in short, had you not been kicked out of a fine castle for the love of Miss Cunegonde, had you not been put into the Inquisition, had you not travelled over America on foot, had you not run the Baron through the body, and had you not lost all your sheep, which you brought from the good country of El Dorado, you would not have been here to eat preserved citrons and pistachio nuts. Excellently observed, answered Candide, but let us cultivate our garden. Voltaire, Candide. Chapter 1. The Gardens. On Tuesday, October 28, 1924, while eating breakfast in his Park Avenue apartment, writer Irvin S. Cobb discovered an annoyance that accompanied fame. There, in the New York Times, for all to see, was the amount he had paid the federal government for its relatively new income tax. At least Cobb could take some comfort in the fact that he was not the only one whose tax payment had become public. In fact, for the past 3 days, newspapers had entertained their readers by listing the tax payments made by the nation's best-known citizens. That he was among those the New York Times selected to publish probably confirmed his own sense of his literary importance. The blame for this fiduciary unmasking of the rich and famous fell to a poorly written section of a new federal tax law passed by Congress in June. Befuddled tax officials interpreted the passage to mean they had to disclose the payment portion of an individual's tax return to any inquiring reporter or citizen. Thus, for a brief moment before Treasury Department officials regained their wits and resealed the records, the veil of tax secrecy was lifted. Wall Street financiers buzzed with the revelations. A garment industry businessman discovered his partner had lied about the poverty of their shared enterprise and was actually flush with cash. Even romantic matters were not immune from the disclosures. Along with the reporters who flocked to the tax offices in the New York Customs House, a number of women came seeking to compute the true income of their fiancés and husbands. "I am finally going to find out how much my husband makes," said an excited woman, while another woman calculated how much alimony she should seek in her divorce. Although it paled in comparison to John D. Rockefeller Jr.'s incredible $7,435,189.41 payment, the only one above $1 million, Cobb's $5,762.20 payment, listed in the New York Times, gave authenticity to the rumor that he was the best-paid writer of the 1920s. It was, for instance, 25 times the amount paid by his neighbor, writer Fannie Hurst, described by critics as a female O. Henry. Money-making aside, Cobb was certainly one of the United States' best-read writers. In 1923, 10 of New York's leading editors, critics, and writers, supping in an elegant restaurant, erupted into an argument as to who were the best living U.S. writers. It was decided that each would mark his first and second choice in various genres on an anonymous slip of paper. The outcome of the ballot, reported the magazine Current Opinion, was such as to give Irvin S. Cobb a kind of primacy in contemporary letters. He appeared on 8 of the 10 lists. Cobb's fame was so extensive that he had even licensed his name to a line of cigars with his likeness on the box. The rendering was highly flattering. In life, Cobb's looks were a favorite of caricaturists. He was a huge man, whose drooping cheeks, large jowls, and protruding eyes gave him an undeniable toad-like appearance. Over time, Cobb, a perpetual showman, came to regard his apparent homeliness as an asset. While covering World War I, he was the most easily recognized correspondent and was continuously mobbed by U.S. troops everywhere he traveled. As a result, he did nothing to diminish his distinctiveness. Quite the opposite. He favored knickers, boots, and long jackets with numerous buttons worn closed, accentuating his barrel-like physique. In his hand, if not between his teeth, he always held a smoking cigar. Famous and recognized whenever in public, Cobb could hardly blame the newspaper reporters for having a field day with his income tax records. Before the money, the Park Avenue apartment, the country house, and the Algonquin lunches, Cobb would have been the first to write up such a story for his city editor when he, in his own words, sweated between the decks of a Park Row slave ship. He would have no choice in the matter. Before he won his manumission from the tyrants who ruled the newsrooms in the heyday of yellow journalism, Cobb had toiled for Charles Chapin, the most accomplished, notorious, and feared city editor of them all. Chapin, recalled Alexander Woolcott, a fellow Park Row escapee and one of New York's leading drama critics of the 1920s, was the acrid martinet who used to issue falsetto and sadistic orders from a swivel chair at the Evening World in that now haze-hung era when Irvin Cobb was the best rewrite man on Park Row and I was a Christian slave in the galleys of the New York Times. For 2 decades, until his abrupt and dramatic departure from the scene in 1918, Chapin had set the pace for the city's vibrant evening press as city editor of Joseph Pulitzer's Evening World. Beginning in the morning and sometimes stretching late into the night, the buildings on Park Row shook as massive presses rolled out hundreds of thousands of copies of evening editions. On any street corner, New Yorkers heading home could buy one of a dozen papers filled with news as fresh as the ink for as little as a penny, hawked by the young peddlers known as newsies. When the events warranted it, such as during the Harry Thaw trial or the sinking of the Titanic, evening papers would publish hourly editions that were consumed immediately by a news-hungry public. More than 2,600 newspapers battled daily for the hearts and minds of the nation's readers. This was the golden age of the newspaper. They were indispensable reading and definers of reality. As never before, the features of city life were mirrored in a daily pageantry of print. In the guerrilla warfare of yellow journalism, any editor who valued his job got a copy of the Evening World within minutes of its publication. He could order a rewrite of an Evening World exclusive for his paper, then sit at his desk and await the descent of the publisher from upstairs while constructing an explanation as to why only Chapin's paper had the story. Tiny tot with penny clutched in chubby hand dies under tram before mother's eyes. Editors were saved from being fired only because all publishers knew that Chapin was unbeatable. A kind of journalistic equivalent to the Civil War's renowned Bedford Forest, Chapin knew where hell was going to break out and got there before it broke. The only strategy to beating Chapin would be to hire him, and Pulitzer continually feared that his nemesis, William Randolph Hearst, whose checkbook seemed bottomless, would do just that. Chapin's professional life spanned the birth and adolescence of the modern mass media. In the 1880s, Chapin's sensational crime reporting in the legendary world of Chicago journalism made him one of the best-known apostles of what was then known as new journalism. In the 1890s, he arrived in New York just when the revolution Pulitzer had sparked was transforming Park Row into the epicenter of American journalism. And as the city editor of Pulitzer's Evening World for 2 decades, Chapin became the model for all city editors, real and fictional.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?